What's up, Hoof listeners? Welcome in to this beautiful Thursday evening. Training camp is underway. Rookies reported 2 days ago, and we are
Mm,
officially 2 weeks away from the Hall of Fame game, the first game of the season.
Preseason, yeah,
So
man,
2 weeks today.
it's getting started. Feels good. People are reporting we're getting that much closer. We say it every week, but the days are ticking down. Time is getting real. It's going to be fun. So the anticipation is building, though. As we get closer, there's more and more anticipation, which is fun.
Definitely fun. It's the Houston Texans, the Chicago Bears. I'm not sure, what we'd be watching for in that game. Doubt Caleb Williams plays, right? Not sure if we'll see CJ Stroud. Don't think we'll see Diggs. So again, it is just nice to have football on, right? So looking forward to that. What else we got this week? Like I said, Bills started. Rookies reported the 16th, so training camp officially underway for the rookies. Veterans report 7:23 next week.
So 1 week, yep. It's goes by quickly. The guys, it's nice that the rookies get there, get to set up, get to, have conversations with whoever's there, coaches and whatnot. So, it makes sense that rookies have to get in early, get a little more work in, get a little more comfortable with the environment versus the veterans. They all know what they're getting into and the protocols and all that for training camps. So, yeah, it's good to see rookies, although not much news has come out yet about rookies being there and their interactions they're having. So, yeah, we'll see what comes out when it all gets started. But one step at a time, and we're one step closer. So, yeah, one
Yes,
day,
one.
one step, 1 hour. It's really the cycle right now.
Yeah. So how long until week one of the NFL now? 60 days,
For the Bills, oh, it's less than that, right? Because that's 2 months. So
right? So
the
third
built-in Buffalo
35.
countdown has until the Bills game, right? Which I think is now at 52 days. 52 days until the Bills week 1 game versus the Cardinals as of today. So that's pretty close, man. That's a lot closer than it feels, right? Way less than 2 months, and yeah, September will be here before we know it. So training camp, once it gets here, it flies by, right? Because you're like, dang, day after day, there's news coming out. There's, oh, look at this guy. There's, updates from around the league. Yeah, so it goes by really, really quickly, and it's week to week. You have a preseason game, and it's the next week for this preseason game, and how many practices can you get in? So it's 52 days until the Bills play
Right.
a real football game. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's exciting, and that's going to come quick, right? So counting down 52 days, that's going to fly by. So football will be here before you know it. We'll be drinking pumpkin spice lattes and watching some football. So looking
fall
forward to that.
time. Yeah,
Yes.
getting ready for Halloween, although for me that's a year-round thing. So
All right. So tonight, doing things a little bit different. We want fan participation. So throw your questions in the chat. All live questions get priority. I do have some backups if we end up a little dry, but all Hoof listener content tonight. I'll be answering your questions. Certainly appreciate the engagement the past few weeks. Definitely John Robert, always commenting. Joey Hatch always commenting. Definitely our top two commenters over the past few weeks. So appreciate the engagement. And yeah, we are open for business. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will start diving in. But one thing just to get started here was the Bills have a scheduled joint practice with the Pittsburgh Steelers
yes, that was announced.
August
Yeah.
15th. Yeah. So do you think that helps the team? Do you think joint practice makes a difference or?
I mean, sure, it just gives you a little more, a practice with a competitive nature built in, right? You don't have when you're playing your own defense, those are your same guys, right? You're still rooting for them. So there's not as much, although they do make it competitive amongst each other. At the end of the day, you still love that guy, right? But when it's a different team, there's no love there. I mean, there's a sense of respect and like you're not trying to hurt people, but it brings up the competitive nature, and I think will gear things up a bit to getting ready for the season. So I'm a fan of those types of practices, even though it's not apparently open to the media or whatever. I don't think that matters as much as what actually happens in that practice, right? So, and who actually gets reps and everything. Yeah, it should be a good thing for all the players involved and whoever gets action when you're going up against a real opponent, and it's not full pads, full action, full game time. Obviously, it's
Mhm.
still training camp practice, but against another opponent. So, yeah, I just think adding that extra layer is always good for both sides when we can make things like that happen.
Right, you actually have you work as a team, right? You're not playing your own team. Gets you in the vibes, like going to a game, playing the
Hmm.
opponent, game planning, all that stuff. So I think it's a good thing overall. I'm not sure what if the Bills done a joint practice every single year. I don't think they did one last year, right?
No, they did not. I think it's
Right.
been a few years since the Bills did one, actually.
Yeah, I remember they
The
used to do
last
a
one
lot
was
with
versus,
Carolina.
yeah, Carolina,
Yeah,
because that's
yeah,
where McDermott had all his connections. So, but even that one was years ago. So yeah, it's been a while for the joint practices, but I always like them. I mean, you could say, oh, you don't want to put anything out there or whatever, and it's not real. But again, going up against somebody who isn't your teammate, that's always going to be good for preparation. Just that's the normal thing you do on game days when it's real action time. So, getting it in practice is always good.
yeah. And I wonder who runs with the one. Do you think it's Russell Wilson for Pittsburgh?
I would assume so. Yeah, I think they actually stated that it was going to be Russell Wilson going with the ones for now. And
Yeah,
then
he probably starts week 1, I would assume.
I think so. Yeah, and it'll take a couple weeks of figuring out what his ceiling is there, or what the situation is there in Pittsburgh before they make the switch to Justin Fields, because I do think he'll end up taking over the job. He's too young and talented and has a much higher
Yeah, he's certainly
longevity.
an athlete, right? Big time athlete. The legs, speak for themselves. Very productive on the ground. Can he make all the throws? Personally, I don't think so from what I've seen. I
Yeah.
haven't watched a ton, but the few games I have watched, uh, you know, doesn't really have the arm talent to throw it all over the field, right? But if you get the right coordinator, like Tua, like some of the other quarterbacks in the NFL, the Sean Paytons of the world, they can work with you and you can be a really productive quarterback with underwhelming arm talent, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see. And I'm not sure if Pittsburgh has that type of coordinator, but I mean, there's a lot to like about Justin Fields' athletic ability, right? So that'll be really fun to pay attention to as well. Very interesting case for the Pittsburgh offense this year. All right, let's bring it on. John Robert asked a question. Who do you think will be the return man? This is a great
Ooh,
question
yes,
because
it is.
just feel like there really hasn't been any emphasis on this, right? There hasn't been
Mhm.
really a lot of talk about this.
Especially with the rule change, right? That's the whole
Right.
thing this year. There's a different kickoff. There's punt returns too. It just says return man. So obviously, punts are the same, really, but the kickoff game is definitely different, and that is probably going to figure to be a different style of returner than usual, and even just special teams as a whole, as we've talked about, is going to be different in terms of the bodies you want and the rules of where people can line up, and that's going to affect, again, body types and players you have in certain situations. I think that they drafted Daquan Hardy with the idea of him being on the active roster as the return man. So I think that, you know, he'll make the roster, even though he's a 6th round pick. I think he's going to be on the active roster. Does he provide depth at, defensive back? Sure. But I think the main role will be touching the ball
Yeah.
on those kickoffs. And just because he's done it in college and he's shown he can be successful at that. And, there's still other guys. Curtis Samuel is one that, he's always dynamic when he touches the ball. So why not put him out there for kick returns? Well, I think he's going to be a big part of the offense. So do you really want him out there for that?
Right.
That is the question I have there. But he would certainly be capable and good at that. I know I've heard out there Ty Johnson could do it, and that makes
Mm,
sense as well.
that's a good point.
Speed, running back, he can, make plays. He's used to that. So I like that as well. But my guess is that from draft night, they took Daquan Hardy thinking he's the front runner for being our return guy. This is the type of guy we want to be our return guy.
Yeah, and that's fair. You know, there's no Andre Roberts on the roster anymore, who's purely a return man. Right? So
Man, that's bringing back. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but he's on the roster to return kicks, right? You saw him once in a while in the offense, but didn't really have a lot of production. So I feel like return is going to be return plus. What else can you bring to the roster?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
You know, obviously Curtis Samuel, he seems to be like, you know, the number one receiver at this point. So I doubt it would be him. You know, you don't want to wear the guy out in returns. But again, I think you're right with the kick change, the rule change. You want more of a Curtis Samuel type runner, somebody who's more like a running back, right? Can break arm tackles, things like that.
Right. Coming from and with the new alignments and stuff, right? You can't move until the ball touches down and all that. It's basically like a play, right? When the ball is snapped and the player with the ball is going into the line. That is what literally a running back does, right? So I would imagine that they have an advantage going into this, right? Just around the league in general.
Yeah.
That running back position, obviously it's not likely you wouldn't want to put maybe you do want to put your starting running back out there, but it's probably more likely to be those depth running backs who, again, are built for this. They know what to do when they're putting the ball in their hands and running at guys who are building momentum toward them type of situation, and making, plays in the open field and having the vision to be able to say, oh, I'm going to cut here and go there up the field to get the most yards. A
couple other candidates, KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella. I feel like if they make the roster, they're probably the kick returner, right? That's their, especially Isabella. It's their skill set. They're kind of going to be buried on the depth chart at receiver. So that's
they would have to show me more to make the roster. I think they would have to show me more because of the positions they play, right? I mean, I don't want Andy Isabella on this team just to be a return man if he's not going to get depth at, he might provide wide receiver depth, and maybe he ends up building the chemistry enough that they do want him for that. And
we saw that late last year, right?
Yes.
He's basically just doing kick returns. He had a couple plays in the offense, didn't really go his way.
Sure. But are you investing in that though? I mean, I didn't see enough of that to be like, oh, well, that's the guy I want because he can get so many yards. No, I'd rather see what Daquan Hardy can do. And he provides, again, you need depth at cornerback. Even if that guy never sees the field, that's probably a better situation if that fourth, fifth cornerback never sees the field. And we're talking, outside corner, although Hardy, some argue, is a nickel corner as well. So it depends on where they see him fitting and what position. But I do think, I think there's more upside of having a Hardy on the roster to be that depth position and that than what you just said about a guy like Andy Isabella, who might see 2 plays on total offense and have minimal impact in terms of what he can actually do and, be the return man. So is it possible? Yes. And we have no idea what the Bills are thinking on this. We're just speculating. Right. But I have said that from draft night, basically, that Daquan Hardy is probably the front runner for.
Yeah. And if that's the case, I'm going to hold my breath on every single kick. Right.
With Hardy or with Isabella?
With Hardy. Rookie.
Just because he's a rookie. Yeah.
Well, he's a rookie, returning kicks in the NFL is a lot different than college, right? There's no space. So again, we had the fumbles with McKenzie. We all remember those days.
It's totally different now, though. This is totally different.
True. And really don't know.
Everything in the past to me does not matter. I mean, minimally, right? It matters minimally when you're talking kick return now.
Right. But there's less space now, I think, with the change, right? Defenders are facing you. They're closer,
less space, but more regulation. They can't move until the guy catches the ball or whatever, picks up the ball. I forget the actual rule. It's still learning this, obviously, but when we see it in the preseason, that's going to be a big talking point because we're all going to be seeing it in the NFL level for the first time.
Right. But we all remember Isaiah McKenzie, and his fumble issues.
Yes.
And every time he catches the ball on a kick return or punt return,
well, that's why
you hold your breath. Right.
That's why preseason matters, because Hardy obviously has to show that, right? And not just in the preseason games, but the season in general. So training camp, right? If Hardy's out there and you're showing, hey, when we practice kickoffs, even when nobody's there and it's a closed session or whatever, because we don't want to give this up and we only do it behind closed doors for now, Hardy is the guy who has the hands and can handle it and finds a hole, and he understands the assignment and does it. And again, he's still going to have to prove that he can be that roster depth chart on defense if he's going to make the 53, because nobody is making this roster just being handed a spot like, oh, well, you're a kick returner. Okay, but we'll keep you as a cornerback just because, even though we don't want to see you there. No, you better be able to do both. Same with Isabella. Right. You got to earn that number 6 wide receiver role or whatever it might be in order to be then unseat a guy like Hardy for the return role. Yeah. So is it open? Yes. Is this something we're going to be watching closely in camp? Absolutely. But who knows? They might not ever show us, even in the preseason alignments. You know, they might not have the same guys out there that they do when they're, you know, practicing it in-house or behind closed doors or something. So we'll see how it all works out. But yeah, I'd imagine the names we said are probably the guys in the front runners for that. KJ Hamler, I don't know if he's much of a, you know, a threat there just because of the injury concern and all that. I think he's more of a nice piece to have on your practice squad. And, you know, if something should happen, you have that emergency lever to pull. But I'm not ready to hand him anything on the opening day roster. I think I'd rather have the rookie 6th-round pick as a sure thing to make the 53 than a KJ Hamler.
Fair. Now, 2 spinoff questions real quick before we get to the next one. Do we see Khalil Shakir return kicks? Is that on the table?
No. I mean, maybe. Everything's on the table, so who knows? But if I'm the one making the call, it's no, just because that's one of your most important pieces on offense, right? So,
and if I remember right, he did return a couple kicks last year. I know he did punts.
Yeah, he was out there for a few plays.
For a few. Like that. So he's got the experience.
And punt the return, other question, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah. So.
Right. The other question: do we see Keon Coleman return punts at any time? One of the better punt returners in college, right?
I mean, I'm sure they'll try again. Preseason, they're probably going to try it. And because Coleman is probably not going to have the impact on wide receiver and in the wide receiver position right away, that I think, would they be willing to let him go out there as a kick returner or punt returner? Maybe, but again, that's just dangerous. That sounds like Madden to me, because, you know, even in the Madden versions the last few years, Diggs is like the default return guy for the Bills squad. And I'm always like, why the hell would they have their number 1 star player on offense out there returning kicks? Like, no, that's not realistic. So yeah, I mean, it's more Madden to me than that is a realistic situation. So I would not want to just put Keon Coleman in that situation. Now, if they're like, listen, he just balls out at that spot, then he demands it, right? Then that demands it. And you're not using him as much at wide receiver. But if you're going to use him on day 1 and give him the snaps, which again, I don't think they're going to. So maybe it does make sense. I'm talking myself into this to then give him reps but he has to show something where they're like, you know what? It's worth taking that risk because it's a high reward for you to do this versus a Hardy or a Hamler or whoever else that is, you know, a body that might be more expendable in terms of what they expect from them on the other side, what position they actually play other than returner.
I got one more, and then we'll get off this topic because I know it's dragging on a little. But Lawrence Keys, Tulane, undrafted free agent, did return kicks in college, averaged 26.8 yards per kick return. So another name to keep an eye on. And actually rolls us into John's next question. Thank you, John, for the question. Anybody else has questions, please put them in the chat. We're answering all fan questions tonight. John Roberts, once again, do you think any undrafted free agents make the team? Now, I'll give you a couple names because it's been a while.
Yeah.
I know your favorite, Jack Browning, punter, San Diego State, name to keep an eye on. Keaton Bills, guard, Utah.
Somebody I love as well. Those are your top 2 guys. Might not be
good at football, but if you're looking at the business side, the guy's going to sell a lot of jerseys.
Now, those were the 2. Remember when I did my 53 back, what was it, my May 53-man roster? Right. Those 2 guys made my roster. So, so
why?
I would say,
I mean, the punt one makes sense.
Yes.
Keaton Bills, I'm not real sure why.
I liked his name, and I'm hoping he turns into a talent that they can't not keep. And we needed a guard. I wanted another guard, and that just happens to be the position. So I think that it could work out that way. I hope he balls out in camp, and it does work out that way. So yeah, those 2 were on. I think Browning is likely to make it at this point in my mind, just based on what we've seen and heard so far. However, if you're like, well, is a punter UDFA really count as a UDFA making the team because, it's a punter? Then I would go to somebody like a Keaton Bills. I'm trying to think other ones. Give me some more names and
Frank Gore Jr.,
now he could make
running back.
if there's an injury. He certainly is a candidate, but again, we're not hoping for that. So I'm not banking on that at all. Wide receiver wise, yeah,
Lawrence
I mean,
Keys, who I mentioned,
yes,
Tulane looks like kick returner, but did have
certainly
850 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns at Tulane, and then Xavier Johnson, Ohio State.
Yeah, they really like him actually. So yeah, I mean,
55 games for Ohio State. Not a lot of production, right? 329 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. A lot of rushing yards, 44 carries for 353 yards for him in Ohio State. So that's interesting.
Again, those seem like stash players to me. Like you got them so that you could keep them on your practice squad, see what they've got to develop. But you never know when it comes to competition, right? If there's a real competition, which this year at wide receiver, we all know there's a real competition for those last few spots, especially anybody is in the conversation there. So if those guys ball out and show, hey, I'm ready to do this, and those, just because people passed on me in the draft doesn't mean I'm not ready to go, and they can contribute, and maybe it is through a return job, right? Man, pick your guy is excellent in the return game and has shown that he could catch the ball and be that depth factor that we need in this role. Sure, they can make the roster, but if I'm banking on it, my first bet is obviously the kicker, Jake Browning, and our punter, whatever you want to call him. He actually does kick too. He actually does kick too. So that's not incorrect. But
35 of 47 field goal attempts.
74%
during his time, 100% at point after attempts.
And we've talked about could potentially do the new kickoff, right? So there's a lot of things in play there for him momentum wise to make the roster, mainly the holding, right? If you haven't heard me talk about that, that is what I think is going to be the X factor difference no matter what.
That's a good
why
point.
They go Jake Browning. So Jake Browning to me is going to make the roster. Keaton Bills, I would love to see him make it. They need depth at guard if he can develop and do that. But I might be one of the few people who predicted him to make the roster. So there's some things at play there, and never would surprise me if the Bills, they're not afraid to let a UDFA make the roster, right? We've seen this happen before. They're not afraid to start a UDFA, right? So if the guy balls out and shows he can play and fit the system and understands what's going on in the room, they're going to go with him. And we know that. This isn't one of those teams that's like, you're a UDFA, you're only practice squad guy, no matter what. So that's why I think these guys come to the Bills, because they know they're going to get a legit shot. Frank Gore said as much about Frank Gore Jr. going to the Bills, right? That he knew Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott would actually give his son a chance to make the roster, a legitimate chance to show what he's got.
Yeah, another big name, Gable Stevenson, Olympic gold medalist in wrestling. Soft spot with Sean McDermott being a state champion wrestler back in the day. So
much more
he's a long shot, 6'1", 275, a little undersized for the NFL, but can that wrestling technique carry over? Good person to have in the locker room. I mean, again, I think there's a lot to learn when it comes to football and stuff, and that can be really challenging. So does he make the team? I think that's a stretch. But yeah, another big name to pay attention to. Also, I don't know if you want to count the Travis Clayton. He's the international player. He's technically drafted, I think. So
yes,
wouldn't count him as undrafted. Yep. But again, 6'7", 301 pounds. I mean,
he's 100% not making the roster though, because he's a free roster practice squad spot. So, and by drafting him, you have the rights to him. So 100% not making the roster. But you make a good point with the wrestling background and is he? I don't think. It's a long shot because you've never played football. So to put you on the opening day roster, the 53, no, I don't see that happening either. I want to see him develop though. I believe that they really do have faith that he's capable of doing something. So, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next topic here. John, I see your question in the comments. We're going to skip you for now. You already got 2. I have a couple over here from previous shows or messages we got, questions here. Sean Kennedy, are you going to talk about the inevitable choke in the playoffs this upcoming year? And I think that's a great question because how many times we've seen the Bills choke in the playoffs?
Oh yeah.
Too many times. So
Oh
like
yeah, it's
to
painful.
say that that's not going to happen, I don't think we can say that as Bills fans right now.
I mean, we could say we want it to happen, right? But you're right. Nobody can say that until the playoff time is here and we see what product they put on the field. And that is going to be the biggest fear in the back of the minds of Bills fans, no matter what, right? We've seen this team dominate the regular season, dominate the division, year in, year out, and go down stretches and win games that all matter and build momentum and never out of it. And so they've been the best team and they've been the underdog team, but going into the playoffs, it's been the same story of, the cards not lining up right, injuries or, momentum or, running into the better team in the Kansas City Chiefs. And yeah, so those excuses just have to disappear and you have to get results, right?
Yeah.
And until it does, you're right. We all have that lump in our throat of what can we say about this? Nothing. The Bills have choked in the playoffs. We sucked in the playoffs. I mean, not overall, but when we're kicked out, right? Those final games have not been pretty. And it's got to improve from there. And we know we talked about it last week a little bit too, with that being a big weakness of Sean McDermott. He's got to get better, right? I mean, and it's not just him. The players have to execute. So it's not all on Sean McDermott, but
right. He's Sean McDermott's 5-6 as a playoff head coach. But I feel like those 6 losses have just been brutal. Brutal. I mean, the Kansas City championship game, I feel like the Bills never really had a chance. They were down the whole game. The Cincinnati game, they were really outcoached on both sides of the ball. But 13 seconds and then this missed field goal last year, just brutal, right? But I feel like you had them in both games. You had them, and that's where the questions start to come up: of like, are we actually cursed, or is it coaching? You start looking at Leslie Frazier for 13 seconds. Personally, I look at the offense from last year with the Kansas City game because I feel like with 3 minutes to go at the 40-yard line, just run this clock down. And the last play of the game is going to decide it, right? Get down to the 5-yard line if you can and take 4 shots to the end zone. And that's how we're going to ride or die. But no, we're taking shots at, there's 2 minutes, 30 seconds left and we're taking shots at the end zone. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. So it's fair to look at the offense in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this upcoming season, there's a way to get through the playoffs without playing Kansas City or playing the Bengals, right? And I think at this point, that's really what you got to be hoping for. Could the Bills go to Baltimore and win? I think so. It's a better matchup than Kansas City, right? Nobody can stop Kansas City in the playoffs as of late. And I got no reason to think the Bills can do it this year, right? So, and we know how the Cincinnati thing goes. You just don't match up with them, period, right? They just make you look silly every time.
That's the team that I actually know we can beat the Chiefs. We don't know that we can beat this Cincinnati team. We know we can beat the Chiefs. Been there, done that. We're a better team than them most of the time. And then the magic happens that is Kansas City and why they've been the team that they are in the playoffs, especially, and they end up getting the best of us. But it's the Cincinnati, I think, that we would have to prove the most against. So my hope is that they don't even make the playoffs somehow in that competitive division. But that's not my prediction. Right. My hope is that, but that's not my prediction. I predict they're going to win the division probably, and then, put them in good standing to.
Right. And last year I thought okay, the Bills got the 2 seed. If Kansas City had the 1 seed, you wouldn't face them until the championship game if you won the wild card in the divisional round.
Right.
It gives you 2 chances for somebody else to knock them out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's really what you got to be hoping for if you're a Bills fan in the playoffs this year. But I think, as we know, it's just not going to fall our way. That's like the perfect scenario is not playing Cincinnati or Kansas City, but that's just not going to happen. You're going to have to find a way to beat them, right? And the Bills can do it. They've proven that they can beat Kansas City, as you said. It just hasn't gone our way, but they need to learn, like, you got to take every single advantage of your opportunities in those games. And I feel like the Bills, they didn't do that in the Kansas City game last year.
No.
All right, let's get to another one here. John Roberts keeping us alive here. Appreciate it. John Robert, not Roberts. Do you think Bobby Babbage will call plays?
I like this question because, everybody's wondering what it is. Here's my take on it. Will Bobby Babich be named the play caller? I think so. I think Sean McDermott is at the point where he's saying, you know, this defense, you've learned under me. You basically call it the way I would call it. However, Sean McDermott has the reins, right? He's got the reins. He lets them out. He says, yeah, you can call, but whoa, hey, this situation, you're calling my play, right? Like, no. It's my play. This is what we're calling. So Sean McDermott will still have his thumb on the scale for the defense, right? He is, yes, I'm Bobby Babich, you're calling the plays, but I'm the one standing right behind you with the presence of, hey, I don't like that, so here's what we're going to go with, or just flat out saying, we're calling this, and that's the way it goes. And they might be on the same page for some of those, but I do think that is how it goes with Sean McDermott giving up, especially defensive play calling. It's okay, I trust you. Yes, you've learned to call plays, and we've heard Babich say it himself. Well, I don't know. I've never done it, and we have to practice it. And all I can promise is that I'm going to practice and get better at it and eventually gain Sean McDermott's trust to be the play caller. But I do think ultimately the way he shaped this defense, Sean McDermott, I mean, Babich is now the defensive coordinator, all these new coaches, it's a younger system. They brought in their players, younger players. I think that Babich is really the one shaping the defense in the mold of Sean McDermott, but I think that Sean McDermott ultimately wants to give him control of this and still have those reins a little bit for those situations, especially early on. Once he proves himself, maybe he lets Babich call it, no problem, no matter what. But I think early on, Sean McDermott will still have influence.
Right. Yeah, well said. And I think Bobby Babich is absolutely ready for this, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's been in football a long time. His resume is huge. 40 years old, right? He's been in defense his entire career. Back in 2006 with Kent State, started out as a graduate assistant, but then secondary coach, administrative assistants for the coaching staff, defensive assistant, with Cleveland for a while, defensive backs coach, safeties coach with Cleveland the next year, jumps back to college, defensive pass game coordinator, and then with the Bills in 2017 as the assistant defensive backs coach. And we kind of know the story from there. But this guy's dad was a successful coached in the NFL, coached in college. He's been with Sean McDermott since the beginning. Look, if he's not ready to call plays now, he'll never call plays. Sean McDermott always have his hands in it, I feel like. So I think Sean McDermott's kind of have a loose leash, in my opinion. But again, I think when things get tight, it's third down, you got to have it, right? Maybe the record's not so pretty, so it adds pressure. And I feel like Sean McDermott's kind of a hands-on guy, right? So he might come in and say, I'm taking over for this series, like we've heard about with Leslie Frazier. That happened with him. So yeah, I think Sean will have his hands in it, but Bobby's absolutely ready for this, in my opinion. The guy's been around football his entire life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what's got him to where he is now. Right. And he even said, I haven't called plays, but I'm learning to, and I have full confidence that I can. I think that's exactly how I feel about it too. Like we all should. He's got the experience. He took this job with a lot of momentum going in his direction. There's no reason to believe that play calling is going to suddenly be the issue he falls apart on somehow. So yeah. But it is very situational, and you do got to learn from just doing it, right? And I think that's where it's going to start in the preseason.
All right, let's get to the next one here. M. Homan, 00. Does Jamarcus Ingram make this 53-man squad? It's a good question. Buffalo native, and they're pretty thin at corner, as we've talked about, right?
Yes.
So if there is a year, this is the year, in my opinion. Let's look at what was your depth chart? We did the.
I did have Jamarcus Ingram on there because I think they're very high on him. They were last year, right? And then I think
So you had Douglas, you had Taron Johnson, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam.
Yes,
that's 4.
And then Ingram.
And Ingram was 5, and that was it.
Yes.
So you're saying if we went with that scenario, Ingram's beating out Kyron Brown, D. Delaney, Daquan Hardy, Corey Couch.
Well, Hardy still makes it as the return man in my mind, but yeah.
Kenny H. Lovely, Kendall Williams is a safety. But yeah. So again, Yeah, the opportunity is absolutely there for Jamarcus Ingram.
Yeah, I
right?
think it's
But
not even there. I
it's
think right
competitive.
now he's like one of the penciled in guys, right? I would say by default, he is one of the guys on the roster right now. Now, if they bring in competition or can he get beat out by one of the other guys you mentioned? Sure. But is it likely? I don't think so because the staff is very high on him from last year. He knows the system. He's been in it for a year. He's got all the momentum going his way to then, move up on the roster and be one of these key depth guys. So, yeah, I think they really like him, and I have a
Yeah, I
lot of
think what
confidence that he's going to
yeah,
make the roster one way or
uh,
another. Because if they keep
right.
six, he'll be the sixth, even if they end up signing somebody,
Mhm.
depth wise or something.
Especially special teams plays a role in that. The fifth or sixth corner got to play special teams.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think really like Kyrie Elam's success plays a factor here. If Kyrie Elam, is actually going to play cornerback this year, the coaching staff gets his trust or
Hmm.
believes in him, they're not going to bring somebody in to help them out, right?
Yeah,
If they bring somebody in and keep Kyrie Elam, you know, it just knocks him out. It knocks him out of the roster, right? So that's a very real scenario that could happen. Is we're not confident in Kyrie Elam, um, can't move him. He's on a rookie deal. Everyone's questioning why he's not playing. So, you know, they end up keeping Kyrie Elam and bring somebody in. That could very well happen.
indeed. Yeah, I do think that's on the table as well. That both could happen. He could still make the roster even if they bring somebody in.
All right, let's see. Let's stick to the same topic here. John Robert again, keeping us alive tonight. Appreciate it. Do you think Kyrie Elam steps up his play, especially with Addy being quarterback coach now? And he's a former. They were in the college together, right? If I understand that right.
I definitely believe that Elam will take a step, right? There's a lot of reason to believe that, right? Number one, well, he can't get much worse, right? He's not his expectations, his playmaking, he's made a few splash plays, but overall, not good so far. We saw that he was dealing with injury last year. Now, right? That's been revealed. We knew there was tension with the coach that has been reported. That issue is cleared up. So I think Kyrie Elam, in my mind, is definitely going to be the best version of himself that we've seen. New coach, healthy, coming into this with expectations of at least being the cornerback three, outside cornerback three, right? So I do think there is every reason to believe that Kyrie Elam will take the next step. Now, coaching wise and on the field wise, is he going to, execute to a level that lives up to a first round pick? I don't think my expectations are there yet. I think he still has that kind of a ceiling, but my expectations aren't there yet. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Elam. All the confidence that he has the ability and will be better and will learn. But in terms of the ceiling of that confidence for me right now, not thinking that he's going to blow the roof off and suddenly be this amazing star cornerback that lives up to the number one pick that he
Mhm.
was.
Right, and the coach cornerback relationship went sour last year. He has a fresh start, right? So you got to take advantage of that, right? Anything you had, whether it was not preparing the right way, not putting the effort in, whatever it was, right? It's all gone now, right? Because it's a fresh start, and you have an opportunity to kind of redeem your career here. Because otherwise, it's like Kyrie Elam's going to end up on the street, and we'll see. We know the guy's talented, right? Maybe the defense isn't a good fit for him. That could be it. But yeah, I think him having a fresh start is the best thing that can happen for Kyrie Elam. So if it doesn't work out this year, you got to start looking to move him, in my opinion.
Yeah, but what can you get for him? You're not getting it.
Not
You're getting
much,
not barely anything. I
but you're
mean,
not
that's
getting
at that
anything
point.
from him being on the roster either, right?
True, then you just cut him. You're not. I mean, you're going to get a
Yeah,
6th round pick, maybe if
right,
you're
right.
lucky.
And when I say move him, I'm not necessarily meaning trade him. I'm saying let's get that roster spot opened up and try again next year, right? With a new draft pick, whatever it is. They love drafting corners, so why not draft another one next year?
So yeah, move on from him. You're
Move on.
basically saying,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. All right, let's look Got another question here. Let's see. John Robert, what do you consider will be our final record?
Oh boy. We went through this a few months ago as well. It's weird to say that now, isn't it? Months ago we did this when the schedule dropped. And I was at the times when we went through and said win loss, I was at 13. I do think the magic number for this team is 12, and that's what I've been saying all along. That 12 makes sense to me. When I go through the games, I don't find as many losses, and I get to 13 wins. But 12, it's just I think that's going to be what it takes to win the division and to be, the number 2 or 3 seed. Hopefully, the number 2, at least. Maybe a run at the 1. So yeah, I like that a lot.
I do have my sticky note from that show still here. So I had the Bills at 11-6. The 6 losses were Baltimore, Miami, Kansas City, San Francisco, Detroit, and the Jets.
Blah.
Which I thought was pretty reasonable.
We were different on a lot of the losses, so that's interesting too. So
yeah, well, I mean, look, you don't win every division game. You just don't win every division game.
No,
so
that's
I had
reasonable.
Split with Miami, split with the Jets. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, it is.
You could go the other way too. You could sweep Miami and lose twice to the Jets, right? But I feel like that balance is always there in the division. You beat New England twice, so that puts the Bills in a good spot at 11-6. I think it's at Baltimore, if I remember correct. So that's a tough place to play.
Baltimore. Yes.
Kansas City's been embarrassed by the Bills in the regular season in Kansas City.
Baltimore's more beatable this year, and we always beat Kansas City in the regular season. So I forget what my losses were. Did you write down my losses?
I don't.
Jacksonville was one of them, I think. Not San Francisco was one of them for me.
Detroit.
No. Detroit was one of them. Yep. So that's 3. And I want to go to that game, so I really don't.
I think you had a Miami split too.
Somewhere in there was another.
You were having a hard time with beating the Jets, right? Like,
because I just
the Bills would lose to the Jets.
Not with the roster. Yeah, I just don't think they're very good. I don't think they're going to be good this year. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think 11-6 sounds more right to me. But that comes down to literally one drive, one play.
Exactly. So you're at 11, I'm at 12, or 13.
Right, exactly.
11 to 13, I think, is a very reasonable range. Anything more than that, holy crap, we've exceeded our expectations. Anything less than that, we're not happy, because 10 is likely not going to win you the division, and you're borderline going to make the playoffs. So that's not good.
All right, here we go. Joey Hatch. I knew he'd pop in at some point. One of our comments often, right? So, can everybody agree that there's no way Buffalo's getting Brandon Ayuk?
Yes, thank you, Joey. Right? Like, let's have some common sense here. This is a wide receiver who's asking for a trade because he wants more money. The Bills don't have money right now. Not only that, he's a older wide receiver in terms of what the Bills could get, either in free agency or through the draft, obviously, is where we'd like to get that starting wide receiver. So Ayuk, and I never liked the idea of Ayuk coming to the Bills anyway, right? Like, it was talk of this months ago, oh, he could be traded. And I'm just like, that's not the guy who moves the needle for me as much. Not to take away from his talent, but I think that on this Bills roster, if you're adding Ayuk, you already kind of have that skill set, right? With Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir. So, I mean, why add another one like that who's asking to be traded, who's asking for more money, who you're going to have to make, a star, because obviously that's why he wants out of where he is. So it just doesn't make sense on any level to me. I hate that people are even talking about it or putting us on lists like that, because we know that I'm confident in our wide receiver core as is. I don't think we need to add anybody. So I just don't know that it definitely doesn't make any sense financially. To me, it doesn't make sense in terms of his on-field play or the off-field reasons why he's there. So I'm out on this move happening.
Yeah, same. I just think the Bills are back in the marketplace, right? They have some cap space, so that gets people excited. But like, I would be patient here, right? Don't just jump on the first receiver who wants to be traded. next year I think is the year if you want to go get somebody and the team shows you that, yeah, you need somebody. I think next year's the year you make a move like that. This year, I think it just sets you back, right? And I'm not sure if really Brandon Ayuk really moves the needle. He's, it's Kyle Shanahan's systems, and they have, CMC. So everyone's focused on Christian McCaffrey and, George Kittle. So I think he gets a lot of opportunities in that offense, right? 1,300 yards receiving last year. He had over 1,000 the year before, 15 touchdowns in the last 2 years. So, I mean, he's been very productive for San Francisco. Will that transfer to Buffalo? I just don't see it. It's just not the same type of system, right? A lot of balance in San Francisco, a lot of disguise through the running game, right? If you watch Miami, they'll run the ball, the off tackle about 5 times, and then they'll run that same off tackle play, but then throw it, right? And I think it's a lot of that. And I don't know if the Bills really could use Brandon Ayuk's skill set.
Yeah, it's
to the,
yeah. I mean, he's still a star, and he will be for some team. And I don't know if he deserves the money he's asking for, or whatever he wants, or the big contract. But he'll get more than he's worth on the Bills roster. So that's eliminates him in my mind alone. And I know I said he's an older wide receiver, particularly than the draft. Walter made a comment in the chat too, particularly to the draft and on this roster. On our roster, he'd be the oldest wide receiver there. So, I mean, he's definitely older, and you're investing. So, yeah, it's tough. I just don't think it makes sense. That's all.
It's fair. Yeah, I'm just thinking of who else would be available next year, but it's kind of we'll have a show about that.
Yeah, right. That's next year's problem.
Yeah, and really, you got to see what you have. I think is Keon Coleman this guy, right? What's Curtis Samuel got left?
Yeah, you gave Curtis Samuel a 4-year deal, right? Like it's not a 1-year audition with him.
So I would say the Bills have every intention to just see what they have on the roster and see, is it a step back? Is it not good enough? I think Kansas City tried this. They ended up winning the Super Bowl, so it's really a tough analysis, right? Because their receiving core wasn't good last year. Right, they made tons of mistakes. Really, the receiving core lost them more than 2 games. You know what I mean? With the offsides, right? Then there's a drop in the end zone. I mean, stuff like that. But they still won the Super Bowl. So you're like, okay, well, bad example.
Wide receiver core they've ever had.
Right. So, but you could clearly tell, okay, they need to get better at receiver. That that was clear. And we'll see what the Bills do. I like their roster. I think Keon Coleman's a good ad because.
I mean, he's 20. So, yeah.
Well, he's 20, but, he's going to catch those balls that are off just a little bit. When Josh Allen's throwing on the run, the ball's not always perfect, right? So I think that type of player who has a lot of ability with his hands is going to benefit Josh a lot. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. Not to mention, Kincaid's hands, right? James Cook's hands. I mean, there's a lot to like about the offense as it is right now. All right, JKs, before it goes off the screen here. What game do you think the Bills drop that no one sees them losing when looking at the schedule? This is a great question. I'm pulling up the Bills' schedule real quick because I think there's lots of them.
But that's the problem.
What's going to happen.
Games. It does. Yeah. Again, teams lose to teams they shouldn't lose to all the time.
Yes.
But every week. But you don't want to be that team because it's painful to even think about losing to an inferior team, especially when you look at the Bills' schedule and you've got a ton of hard teams on there. It's like, dang, if you can beat Kansas City and Detroit and San Francisco, there's no reason you shouldn't beat. We don't play them this year, but Tennessee, right? Or, not that Tennessee isn't good, but they're much less than the other 3. So
you play Tennessee October 20th, 1 p.m. game.
Yeah. Oh, we do play 10. Yeah. So that's, again, that could be a game, right? Tennessee to me is that team that.
And to me, New England pops
shouldn't
up.
Lose. You should not lose that game. There's no way you should lose that game, but you could.
Yeah, New England pops up for me just because it happened last year. It happens once a year, basically. But Drake May will have experience when they play late in the year. Maybe it's his best game of the year because it's late, getting comfortable as the year goes on. No. It just feels that way. It just feels there's always that. The Patriots are always the team that you're supposed to beat, but they find a way to beat the Bills.
I hope you're dead wrong on that.
What else on here? Let's see.
Tennessee is a good one because I think they have a high upside. They can play well. Even if their record is bad when we play them, it doesn't mean they're a bad team necessarily. So I think, Tennessee
How about
is a good one.
the Jaguars are on the schedule. They're always that type of team as well.
I have us losing to the Jaguars, so that one doesn't surprise me.
Right.
And we've lost to them twice already. So, I mean, that's a team that just beats us when they shouldn't all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't think that one would be as surprising, honestly.
And the rest of them, it feels like, okay, yeah, I could see the Bills losing or winning, right? Teams like the Seahawks, teams like the Lions, like those are respectable teams. How about the Colts? That would be one that you think you should win.
That's a good one too, in terms of I would put that in this category of pretty much everybody's going to have picked the Bills to win that game, and the Bills should absolutely win that game. But with the talent they have there and the upside that they've shown already, even without Anthony Richardson last year, if they're able to stay healthy and do something, they could really make a run at it. So they could be a team that upsets the Bills as well. Again, am I going to predict that? No. Is anybody at that time? Probably not. Maybe some Colts fans, but that doesn't make it any better for sure.
All right, let's get to the next question here. We already did that one. Okay, let's go. This is Joey Hatch. This is actually from 2 weeks ago, Joey. Name one player on Buffalo's offense that puts fear in any defensive coordinator's heart besides Josh Allen. The problem is they don't build around Josh. They give him nothing, and they're wasting him.
James Cook would be the first one that I'd say, just because he what he showed last year is that teams can't just overlook him anymore, right? He is a true playmaker, and especially in this offense and what he has around him, he is built to succeed in this offense. So you do have to worry about the run game with the Bills, and you do have to worry about James Cook catching passes in the offense. So I do think he's a dynamic playmaker that coaches do say, hey, that's a guy we can't just overlook. And, I would say the same about like a Kincaid, who's a threat in terms of, what he can do on the field. And teams are going to be game planning around him when they see him. And Shakir has shown enough where he's going to get attention from defenses now. What that means. Does he strike fear? Probably not. But are they game planning for him? Absolutely. I think more Kincaid in terms of striking fear, and definitely James Cook to me is the first piece of that. Who on offense is striking fear? It's James Cook. That's who it's Josh Allen, and then it's James Cook. And then I would go to Kincaid and Samuel and
we'll see if Kincaid's role changes, but I feel like he's the check down in the offense, right? So you can almost overlook him if you're planning a defense because you don't want to get beat deep. But you look at the roster and you're like, who can beat us deep this year? It's MVS, right? And he's 30 years old now. So again, I mean, I almost agree with Joey where it's like you're not really scared of anybody, right? But you're more scared of the balance and the smart decision making by the quarterback, and that's really what we're relying on this year, right? They don't have a player like a Randy Moss or somebody who are like, wow, we got to double cover this guy all day. That's definitely not on the roster. I think we can all agree with that. But name one superstar weapon on offense outside of quarterback that's carried his team to the Super Bowl. You can argue Randy Moss, but they lost. I mean, maybe that's your only argument.
I mean,
anybody else?
Running backs, yeah. I mean, you think about the running backs who were stars last year. I mean, CMC last year did a lot. You could argue he got his team to the Super Bowl. Would they have gotten there without him? I don't think so. I don't think they're getting there without him. So
they get nowhere without Brock Purdy.
No, I think that's the opposite. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that's the case. I think CMC is the one who makes that team. And if you put me at quarterback with CMC, you still get half the production of Purdy and you could still make a Super Bowl because you have CMC, right? So to me, although I'm not taking away from Purdy, and I do think Purdy has done a very good job in the situation he's in, and that's all we can judge him for. I do think there are guys who outside of quarterback can bring their teams to Super Bowls, but they're limited, right? So Josh Allen strikes fear. Yeah. And usually it's the quarterback that you're talking about in those situations, right? And that's the primary person you plan around, and everybody else is, second tier from that.
I want to say like Cincinnati almost. You look at their weapons, you're like, wow, this is gonna be a long day.
Jason.
But again, the needle doesn't move without the quarterback, right? And we have that piece. Quarterbacks can carry subpar talent to Super Bowls. Receivers carrying quarterbacks much, much harder. So just be happy that we're on the right side of that, right?
Agreed.
And this is the rebuild, right? It's year one. Year 2, year 3, I think they'll start to build a more high flying offense as time goes on, right? So you should have Super Bowl expectations every year with Josh Allen. I think that's true. But again, there is no offensive weapon like a Diggs that's going to carry you this year. It's just not going to happen. It's going to have to be balance. What else?
Yeah.
All right, last call for questions. Last call for questions.
Couple questions in the chat now. So yeah, we got another one to go from up there.
Which one are you looking at, Scott?
A little higher up. Where was it? Let me scroll up. Here we go. Simmons. Is the defense going to be as bad as people are saying because we lost the experience that Poyer, Hyde, and White brought? I think this is one of those key questions that everybody's been talking about this offseason, both from the two perspectives, right? There's the national media. Oh, look who they lost. They lost Poyer and Hyde and White. And oh my God, they're going to be falling apart. And then there's the Bills' perspective of, wait a minute, we actually watched every snap of this team last year, and Trey White was injured for the last 2.5 years. Hyde and Poyer were aging. We're not really sure what we're getting from them. They certainly are legends for the Buffalo Bills, but they're not the players in their prime. These are just older players that we were ready to move on from, right? And a Mitch Morse, you could say the same thing from. They made the decision to move on from him thinking that they could upgrade, even though he played very well for us. Thank you for your service, but they decided to move on. It's not like these players all of a sudden decided to leave Buffalo. No, it was just the right time for them to move on and to move the team to make the decision that we're going in a different direction. So I think that is as overhyped of, oh my God, the Bills are going to be bad on defense as it gets, right? Am I happy with our current safety room or the direction they've gone at safety? No, not necessarily. Not in any sense of the word. Am I confident that, the guys we have are going to be half as good as Poyer and Hyde? Do they have the potential to be? Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially last year's version of Poyer and Hyde. So, yeah, there's room for upgrade there, and that's all I can ask for. And in terms of, Trey White, again, when was he at last on the field for the Bills and impactful? And now you've got a Rasul Douglas, who you traded for last year, who stepped up and made it happen, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think this is an important talking point because of that. National media versus Bills media perspective, or Bills intelligence perspective. If you watch the games and know the team, without a doubt, the defense is going to be better this year in my mind. So I'm not as worried about that side of it. And plus, Sean McDermott's a defensive coach. I mean, and he thrives in making defensive backs who they are. So there's so many bullet points to believe the defense is going to be better. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's the only way they're better, in my opinion, is if the people you're relying on step up. And who's that? It's going to be Rasul Douglas with Trey White gone now, right? Mike Edwards is a big name in the safety room. If any one of these guys have a subpar year, it's going to be tough. Matt Milano coming back from injury, huge one. Terrell Bernard,
taking the next step. Yeah,
they got to take this next step, right? It's time for the next group of guys to step in, and there's uncertainty with that for sure.
Yeah, you didn't mention Rapp either, who I think is somebody that they've put their confidence in and saying we're resigning you, and we want to keep you around. I wasn't sold on him, but the team was. So
and that's a real position battle. Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp. I mean, Rapp has a leg up because he's been in the system a little longer, but and Cole Bishop as well. Like, where's he at?
Yeah, well,
second round safety. I can tell they really like the kid.
But I've been very critical of that move because you
Yeah.
drafted him in the second round. You took a safety. That guy's got to be a superstar ASAP.
Mhm.
You took a safety in the second round when there were plenty of other needs and guys there that you could have taken.
Yeah.
Make that guy a superstar ASAP because it's got to happen. You
So
know,
let me
you
ask you,
can't.
so is there as many questions around this defense as there was in 2017 when Sean McDermott took over?
Oh,
Because
wait.
because
No.
because Matt Milano's coming off injury, Von Miller, we didn't see the same Von Miller last year, right? A lot of question marks. You know,
I
Rasul
still
Douglas
think
looked good,
no.
but like, what else, right? Christian Benford, those guys look pretty solid,
I
but then after that, it's very thin.
Yeah, I still think no, just because Sean McDermott has not only proven he knows how to put a defense together, but he knows how to get the most out of the least, right? I mean, we were down to some fifth string guys in the middle of the season last year, and he was still leading the defense, you know, playing well in games. The defense was keeping us in games sometimes. And that's, you know, when you're down that many guys to injury, I think Sean McDermott worked his best coaching last year on the defense, in fact. And even though it wasn't the, you know, least scoring defense he's ever had or something like that, I'm confident that it's better, and it's definitely better than when Sean McDermott first took over, because that's his bread and butter, and if he had it his way, the defense would be dominating and the score of the game would probably be like 7-0 or 6-0. One
All right,
direction.
so yeah, definitely keep an eye on that one as well. All right, let's rapid fire here. We got two more to get to. Who will be the most surprising rookie the Bills took in the draft?
Hmm.
I don't know if Keon Coleman's successful, would it be a surprise?
Yeah, that's what I think no, because of where they took him, right? I mean, maybe because of who they passed on to go with him. Certainly that could be the case.
Yeah, I
but
might go with Stan Van Granger.
yeah,
Just because, you know, if he can get it to the starting position, he's going to play a lot of snaps. Right. It looks like Connor McGovern's clearly in that role. You know, even if Stan Van Granger can get even a guard spot.
Van Pran-Granger, Cedric Van Pran-Granger.
Van Granger. Yeah.
But yes,
Van
same
Pran
guy.
Granger. But
Cedric
anyway,
is his first name, so S is
yeah.
probably sneaking in there. Yeah.
I know we haven't talked about him in a while. But yeah, I think he could be a surprising guy if he can get on the field. Right. Because he has a ton of experience. Smart guy. He's won championships. A lot to like about him as a person. And again, there is a left guard spot open. I think that's an open competition, I would say. So could he sneak in there? Maybe that would be a surprise for me.
Could be, yeah.
That'd be the most surprising.
I like that pick for the sake of being different. I think the two guys that immediately come to mind, I think Dwayne Carter, given the situations he's going to be in, will be impactful, but that might not be surprising to some people. But Javon Solomon is one that I'm super excited for. Not that he's going to get a ton of snaps and be a superstar, but when he gets the opportunity, what does he do with it? And I fully expect he's going to be on the roster and given opportunities. So, and learning under Von Miller, which, I mean, come on, you learn from the guy like that, you're going to be good. So I think that, Solomon would be my pick for something that at the end of the year, we're looking back at the stats, we are going to bring up his name and say, that guy was the most surprising of this group.
All right. And the other question was, what's higher probability? Bills win 2 Super Bowls in the next 4 years or win 0 in the next 4 years?
Mathematically or from a Bills fan perspective?
Well,
because
AI said the Bills are going to win in 2026. So I'm sticking with that. That's one.
There you go.
Two though?
2 is really hard. In 4 years, I mean, really hard for any team, right? Any team, I don't care how good you are, you could be the best roster every single year for 4 years and be given that as a probability generator, and it's still closer to 0 than, it is definite that you will win 2 Super Bowls in 4 years. So,
but with a guy like Josh Allen, you got to think one's on the table.
Certainly one, I would say it has
the Bills win 1 Super Bowl in the next 4 years or win 0.
Yeah,
I might lean towards 1,
Sure. We lean toward 1 as Bills fan. The math would still say 0. There's you know,
Right. Well, it's 1 out
there's
of
so
32.
much
Right.
competition.
Yeah.
There's so much that factors that you can't take into play. The betting odds are 0 for any team, right? I don't care if it's Kansas City. The betting odds are 0 in the next 4 years. So 2 in the next 4 years is a ridiculous ask. I think the better question is 1 in the next 4 years. I'd put my money on that for the Bills. Absolutely.
Ugh.
It's hard though. It's hard. 2 in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We'd be spoiled beyond belief. And could all die happy after that.
I just need 1.
Exactly.
Even just an
Right. 2 would be
appearance
like,
would be a
after
blast.
1, we'd be
Yeah.
like, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do I do
Well,
with my hands?
I'd probably be in jail. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Rioting on
That would be it.
celebration
Yeah, that'd be
night.
it for me.
Yeah.
Start saving your
In
bail
the
money
grave.
now.
How many people would end up in the grave? Forget jail. Just,
Yeah.
we won one. Party until you die. That's
Right.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for putting your questions out there, listening to our responses. We definitely appreciate our listeners. And, anytime you want to, put something to the show, question, comment, something you want to hear us talk about, you can put it in our social media at the Hoof Pod on Twitter, comment in YouTube as you do. We have the Hoof Podcast at gmail.com. So yeah, be sure to, give us a shout out if there's something you want to hear or feedback or anything like that. But definitely appreciate you guys and gals. And we'll be back next week. What do you think next week? Little training camp, little James Cook talk, maybe?
Yeah, we could do that. That makes sense. Yeah, let's make it work. Why not? We got lots to talk about now.
We've overlooked James Cook in the running back room all off season. So tune in with us next week, 7:30, same day. And week after that, we got football.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame game. So
Woo-wee, let's go, baby. It's coming down the pipe. Finally. It's like, man, the long dog days of counting down in between February and when the hype builds up again for training camp. So lots to bring you. But as always, we just appreciate you tuning in, and thanks for kicking it with us.
Have a good night.